Owen Reed had never been afraid of things that should terrify him. At 8 years old, he walked past the energy barriers separating the human quarters from the dragon habitat on Research Station Draenis like they were nothing more than interesting lights. His parents had warned him a dozen times since they arrived 3 hours ago. Stay in the safe zones. The Scarix dragons were not pets. They were ancient, powerful, and temperamental beings who barely tolerated the presence of researchers. None of that mattered to Owen. He could hear them calling. Not with words exactly, but with something deeper. A feeling that pulled at his chest like a string connecting him to something vast and old. He followed that feeling down 3 levels of the station, through corridors that grew progressively darker and more restricted, until he stood before a massive viewing window overlooking the dragon sanctuary below. Ashenwing noticed him immediately. The matriarch was easily the size of a shuttlecraft, her scales shifting between silver and deep blue depending on how the light caught them. She had been resting on a thermal rock, but her head snapped up the moment Owen appeared. Her eyes, each larger than Owen's entire body, fixed on the small human child pressing his face against the reinforced glass. Security alarms started screaming. Researchers scrambled toward the viewing platform, shouting warnings. Dr. Rachel Reed, Owen's mother, came running faster than anyone else, her face white with terror. But before any of them could reach the boy, Ashenwing moved. The dragon launched herself into the air with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. She flew directly at the viewing window, and for one horrible moment, everyone thought she would smash through it to reach the child. Instead, she landed on the platform outside with surprising gentleness and lowered her enormous head until one eye was level with Owen. Then Owen spoke. The sounds that came from his mouth were nothing human vocal cords should produce. They were layered harmonics, deep rumbles mixed with crystalline chimes, sounds that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone listening. He spoke the dragon language, Scarix, with the fluency of someone who had studied it for decades. Ashenwing responded in kind. Her voice shook the station's walls, but Owen listened with perfect understanding, nodding as if they were discussing the weather. The security team froze. The researchers stared. Rachel Reed's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "Owen," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the glass. "What are you doing?" The conversation between boy and dragon lasted 3 minutes. Then Ashenwing did something no one had ever seen her do. She bowed her head to Owen, pressing her snout against the glass in what could only be described as a gesture of respect or recognition. By the time station security managed to override the locks and burst onto the viewing platform, Owen had already stepped back from the window. He looked at his mother with those wide, innocent eyes that had always seen too much. "She remembers," he said simply. "She remembers the old songs." "Owen, how did you?" Rachel couldn't finish the sentence. Her son had just spoken a language that took xenolinguists 30 years to learn, a language that required surgical modifications to the throat just to produce the correct sounds. Owen was 8 years old. He had no implants, no training, nothing that should make this possible. David Reed arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd of shocked researchers. He grabbed his son, checking him for injuries, for anything wrong, but Owen just smiled up at him. "I'm okay, Dad. She's nice. Her name is Ashenwing, and she's been alive for 1,200 years. "You could understand her?" David asked, though the answer was obvious. "I always could, since I was little." Rachel and David exchanged glances. They had known Owen was different, had known since he was 6 months old and made sounds no human baby should make. But they had kept it quiet, hoping he would outgrow it, hoping it was some strange quirk that would fade. Now their secret was exposed to the entire research station. Within an hour, the footage was being reviewed by the station director. Within 3 hours, it was transmitted to the Galactic Council headquarters. Within 6 hours, the galaxy's top experts were boarding ships to Draenis. Owen sat in the family quarters, drawing pictures of dragons while his parents fielded urgent calls from officials who demanded explanations they couldn't provide. Through the window, Owen could see Ashenwing watching their quarters from her perch in the sanctuary. She hadn't moved since their conversation. 2 days later, when the first investigators arrived, Owen underwent 17 different scans. Brain imaging, genetic sequencing, audio analysis. They found nothing unusual. His vocal cords were standard human anatomy. His brain showed normal structure. No hidden technology, no genetic modifications, no explanation for the impossible thing he could do. But when they played recordings of his conversation with Ashenwing to train Scarix linguists, the experts went pale. Owen hadn't just spoken their language. He had spoken it perfectly, with nuances and tonal variations that carried meanings most scholars never mastered. He had used ancient dialect forms that appeared only in texts thousands of years old. "This is impossible," declared Dr. Kira Osman, the galaxy's leading expert on Scarix communication. "The human larynx cannot produce these sounds. The neural pathways required to process this language don't exist in human brains, yet this child speaks it like he was born to it." On the 5th day of testing, Ashenwing requested an audience with the researchers. She had never done this before. In the 30 years since first contact with the Scarix, the dragons had been cooperative but distant, allowing observation while maintaining their own mysteries. Now the matriarch wanted to speak, but she would only do it if Owen was present. They met in a specially designed communication chamber. Owen stood behind a protective barrier, though Ashenwing had made it clear she meant no harm. Researchers crowded the observation room, recording every moment. Ashenwing spoke first, her voice a rumbling thunder. Owen listened, then translated for the humans who couldn't understand. "She says I'm not the first. There was another a long time ago, before the current civilizations rose, someone who spoke to all beings, not just dragons, someone who heard the universe sing." "Who?" Dr. Osman asked through the intercom. Owen listened to Ashenwing's response, and his small face grew serious in a way that made him look far older than his years. "The architects," he said quietly. "She wants to speak with your leaders. She says there are things the Galactic Council needs to know, things they've forgotten, things about where I came from and what I might become." Ashenwing's next words made Owen's eyes widen. He looked at his mother, then at the assembled scientists. "She says I'm the key to remembering what the galaxy was meant to be, and that some people won't want me to exist because of it." The dragon matriarch then did something unprecedented. She demanded a direct, private communication with the Galactic Council's High Chancellor. She would speak to no one else about what she knew, and if they refused, she would cease all cooperation with the research station. The message was clear. Whatever secret Owen carried, it was big enough to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Council, people who had spent centuries keeping certain truths buried were beginning to panic. Needles and sensors covered Owen's small arms as another batch of specialists ran their tests. He had stopped counting how many doctors examined him after the 15th one. They poked and prodded, took samples of everything from blood to saliva, scanned his brain from 17 different angles. Each test came back with the same frustrating result: completely normal human biology. Dr. Amara Silva, a xenoarchaeologist who had arrived 2 days ago, watched the latest scan with narrowed eyes. Unlike the medical teams focused on Owen's body, she was interested in his history. She sat across from Rachel Reed in the station's observation lounge while Owen underwent his latest round of testing. "Tell me about your pregnancy," Amara said. "Were you on Earth the entire time?" Rachel hesitated. She had known this question would come eventually. "No, I was part of an archaeological survey mission, deep space. We were cataloging dead worlds in the outer sectors." "Which worlds?" "There was one." Rachel's voice grew quiet. "We didn't have a name for it in the databases. The crew called it Praxis because it was so practical, so deliberately constructed. The entire planet was covered in structures." Amara leaned forward, her interest sharp. "Describe them." "Crystal formations, massive spires that hummed when you got close. They weren't natural, we could tell that much, but they were old, billions of years old according to our dating equipment. I spent 3 months there, cataloging everything. Rachel touched her stomach unconsciously. I was 4 months pregnant with Owen when we landed, 7 months when we left. Did you feel anything unusual? Experience any symptoms? Rachel nodded slowly. Dreams, vivid ones. I would see lights and hear sounds that weren't quite music. Languages I didn't recognize but somehow understood in the dreams. I reported it to the medical officer, but she said, it was normal pregnancy hormones affecting my sleep patterns. Amara pulled out a data pad and showed Rachel an image. Did the structures look like this? Rachel's breath caught. The image showed crystal spires identical to those on Praxis. Yes, exactly like that. How did you know? Because those structures appear in Scarrick's historical records. They call the planet the homeworld of the first voices. According to dragon mythology, beings called the architects lived there millions of years ago. Beings who could speak to any living thing, who understood the fundamental language underlying all consciousness. Rachel's face went pale. You're saying Owen's ability comes from that place, from exposure to those crystals. I'm saying it's a possibility worth exploring. Owen's testing continued for another week. During that time, he spent hours with the dragons. The Scarricks treated him differently than they treated any other human. They called him Kethriel, a word their language translators couldn't properly convert. The closest approximation was echo of the before time, or voice from when we were young. Cinderclaw, the oldest male dragon at over 3,000 years, would sit with Owen and tell him stories. Not in simplified language for a child, but in the deepest, most complex forms of Scarrick's communication. Owen understood every word. You speak like the old ones, Cinderclaw rumbled one afternoon, his ancient eyes studying the small boy. Like those who sang the world into being. I don't know what that means, Owen admitted. I just hear the words in my head and they make sense. That is because you hear true speech, not the broken fragments we use now, but the wholeness beneath it. The other researchers watched these conversations with growing unease. The Galactic Council had sent official observers, and some of them looked at Owen not with wonder but with fear. They whispered in corners, sent encrypted messages, held meetings that excluded the regular research staff. Dr. Silva noticed the pattern. She had seen this before in her work uncovering ancient sites. Whenever something was discovered that challenged the established order, certain factions moved to suppress it. She began securing copies of all data related to Owen, hiding them in secure locations the official observers couldn't access. On the 12th day, disaster struck during a routine brain scan. Owen was lying in the medical scanner, answering questions about what he saw when he looked at written Scarricks, when his body went rigid. Alarms screamed as his neural activity spiked to dangerous levels. Get him out, Rachel screamed, trying to reach her son. But Owen's mouth had opened and sounds were coming out. Not Scarricks this time, something else. Something that made the station's metal walls vibrate and the lights flicker. The syllables were precise, mathematical, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. The medical team struggled to stabilize him. His brain waves showed patterns never recorded in any species. He wasn't having a seizure in the traditional sense. His mind was accessing something, processing information at impossible speeds. Cinderclaw, resting in the sanctuary 3 levels below, suddenly raised his head. The ancient dragon's eyes went wide with recognition and what might have been fear. He launched himself toward the medical bay, moving faster than anyone had seen him move in years. Bring me to the child, his voice thundered through the station's communication system. Now. Security tried to stop him, but Ashenwing and the other dragons formed a protective formation around Cinderclaw. The station director, faced with either letting one dragon through or fighting all of them, made the only reasonable choice. Cinderclaw was granted access to the medical bay. The ancient dragon pressed his face to the observation window as Owen continued speaking in that unknown language. Tears, actual tears, rolled down Cinderclaw's scaled cheeks. What is he saying? Dr. Osmond demanded. Cinderclaw's voice shook when he answered. The child speaks the first tongue, the language of the architects themselves. He is not merely speaking our language well. He is speaking the language from which all languages were born. Owen's eyes snapped open, though they didn't seem to see the room around him. His voice, still speaking those impossible words, grew stronger. Cinderclaw translated, his voice filled with awe. He says, "I remember the song of creation. I remember when thought became word and word became bond. I remember what we were meant to be together. Why have you forgotten? Why do you hide from the truth of connection?" Then Owen's body relaxed and his eyes closed. The strange language stopped. His vital signs stabilized. But when the medical team checked his scans, they found something new, patterns in his neural structure that hadn't been there before. Not damage, but organization, like his brain had been reaching for something and finally found it. Rachel held her unconscious son, tears streaming down her face. David stood beside her, one hand on Owen's head, the other clenched in helpless frustration. Cinderclaw spoke softly, his ancient voice gentle. "The architects have been gone for millions of years. Their works remained, sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake. Your son has awakened one of their greatest gifts, the ability to truly understand, to speak not just to ears, but to hearts and minds." Dr. Silva stepped forward. "If the architects were real, if their technology still exists, that changes everything we know about galactic history." "It does more than that," Ashenwing said, having joined Cinderclaw at the window. "It threatens those who built their power on keeping species separated and suspicious. The Preservation Directorate has hidden architect sites for 30,000 years. They will not allow a human child to expose what they have concealed." "What are you saying?" David demanded. Ashenwing's eyes glowed with inner fire. "I am saying your son is in danger, because he represents everything the Directorate fears, proof that unity between species was always meant to be possible, proof that their control is built on lies." Owen stirred in his mother's arms. His eyes opened, clear and aware. He looked up at his parents and smiled. "I heard them," he whispered. "The architects, they showed me what they made, what we could all be if we remembered how to listen to each other." Outside the station, a Galactic Council military ship was already changing course, headed for Draenis, carrying orders sealed with the Preservation Directorate's highest security clearance. Ashenwing gathered the dragons in the deepest chamber of their sanctuary, a place where humans rarely ventured. Owen sat cross-legged on the warm stone floor, surrounded by beings that could incinerate him with a breath. He felt safer here than anywhere else on the station. "The time for secrets has ended," Ashenwing announced to the assembled Scarix. "The Directorate moves against us, against the child. We must reveal what we have protected for 50,000 years." Cinderclaw nodded gravely. "Tell them, tell the humans everything." Ashenwing turned her massive head toward the observation cameras that allowed researchers to monitor the sanctuary. She knew they were watching. "Good, let them hear this. When my ancestors first gained consciousness," she began, "we were not alone on Draenis. We found structures buried beneath our nesting grounds, crystal formations that sang with knowledge. Inside them were memories stored by beings who came before, the architects." Dr. Silva watched the video feed with Rachel and David beside her. The station director and several council observers crowded the monitoring room. "The architects did not create us," Ashenwing continued, "but they seeded the conditions for consciousness to arise. They left behind their knowledge, their technology, and their language, the first tongue. We learned it from their crystals. It allowed us to unite our species, to reach for the stars, to become more than savage beasts fighting over territory." Owen listened, and understanding bloomed in his mind. He could feel the truth of her words resonating with something deep inside him. "The first tongue is not merely a language," Cinderclaw added. "It is the foundation of all communication, the pattern underlying thought itself. Those who master it can understand any being, speak to any consciousness. The architects intended for all species to eventually develop this ability naturally through evolution and wisdom." "But some did not want this." Ashenwing's voice grew hard. 30,000 years ago, a coalition of species nearly achieved the architect's vision. They began teaching the first tongue principles to all who would learn. Unity spread. Understanding grew. Conflicts that had raged for millennia ended in single conversations. The station director leaned forward. What happened to them? They were destroyed. Ashenwing's words fell like stones. Not by war, but by sabotage and assassination. Those who held power through division and fear could not allow true understanding to spread. They formed what you now call the Preservation Directorate. They claimed the architect's technology was too dangerous to use. They buried the sites, erased the records, killed those who remembered. We Scarix survived because we hid our knowledge, Cinderclaw said. We pretended the first tongue was merely our natural language, nothing more. We waited for the right moment to reveal the truth. Owen stood up. And I'm that moment, because I have the first tongue without being taught, because the architect's crystals on Praxis gave it to me. Yes, Ashenwing confirmed. Your existence proves the Directorate's lies. You show that humans, the galaxy's newest sentient species, can carry the architect's gift. That it belongs to everyone, not just ancient races or special scholars. Dr. Silva's fingers flew across her data pad, pulling up classified files she had hacked days ago. I found references to something called the suppression protocols, orders to contain or eliminate anything related to architect technology. Owen's name appeared in a security briefing 3 days ago. Rachel grabbed her son protectively. They wouldn't dare harm a child, not openly. They won't harm him, Dr. Silva said grimly. They'll take him, study him in a black site facility, keep him isolated and controlled, make sure his abilities never spread beyond their supervision. David's jaw clenched. Over my dead body. That can be arranged too, a new voice spoke from the doorway. A woman in Galactic Council security uniform stood there, flanked by armed personnel. Dr. Rachel Reed, David Reed, you are hereby ordered to surrender custody of your son to Council authority for protective study. Protective, Rachel's voice shook with fury. You mean imprisonment. The security officer's expression didn't change. The child represents a potential threat to galactic stability. The Preservation Directorate has determined. She never finished. Ashenwing's roar shook the entire station. Every dragon in the sanctuary took flight simultaneously, their wings creating winds that rattled the observation windows. They formed a defensive wall between the security team and Owen. You will not take him, Ashenwing declared. We have been patient, we have been silent, but the time for hiding is finished. This child is under Scarix's protection. Any attempt to seize him will be considered an act of war against Draenus. The security officer paled. The Scarix had never made threats before. They were peaceful, cooperative, valuable research subjects. But now, seeing dozens of massive dragons ready to fight, everyone remembered what they truly were. Apex predators. Ancient warriors who had conquered their entire world before humanity even discovered fire. The Council will not accept, the officer began. The Council does not rule Draenus, Cinderclaw interrupted. This is our world, our sanctuary. We permitted your research station. As a gesture of cooperation, that permission is now revoked. You have 24 hours to evacuate all non-essential personnel. Alarms began blaring as Galactic Council ships moved into combat positions around the planet. The Scarix launched into the sky by the hundreds, their scales glittering like stars. A standoff had begun. Owen stood at the center of it all, this small human boy who had accidentally uncovered secrets that people had killed to protect. He looked up at his parents. I'm scared, he admitted. But Ashenwing is right. If we run, if we hide, nothing changes. The Directorate keeps controlling everything, keeps everyone separated and afraid. Rachel knelt beside her son. You're 8 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this burden. But I do carry it, Mom. I can hear what the architects wanted. They didn't want control or power. They just wanted everyone to understand each other, to not be alone. His eyes filled with tears. They were so lonely, Mom. That's why they seeded consciousness everywhere. They wanted friends. They wanted family across the whole galaxy. David pulled them both into a hug. Then we fight together. Dr. Silva began broadcasting everything. Every recording of Owen speaking the first tongue, every piece of data about the architects, every classified file about the Preservation Directorate's suppression campaigns. She sent it all across the galactic network, too widespread to contain. Within hours, the truth was spreading. Species across the galaxy learned what had been hidden from them. The architects weren't myths. The potential for true understanding between different species wasn't fantasy. It was real, and it had been deliberately suppressed. Support poured in from unexpected sources. The peaceful herbivore species of the Outer Rings, the warrior clans of the Chitresh, who declared that honor demanded they protect a child in danger. Even some council members broke ranks, calling for the Preservation Directorate to be investigated. But the Directorate's military ships continued gathering around Draenus. They outnumbered the dragons 10-1. Their weapons could sterilize the entire planet if given the order. Owen stood at the observation window, watching the ships. Ashenwing landed beside him, her massive body barely fitting on the external platform. "Are you ready?" she asked in the first tongue. "Ready for what?" "To show them what the architects truly meant, to prove that understanding is stronger than fear." Owen pressed his small hand against the glass. On the other side, Ashenwing pressed her scaled claw. "I'll try," he promised, "but I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are not alone, little Kethriel. You have never been alone." Above them, the first Directorate ship moved into firing position. News of the standoff at Draenus exploded across every inhabited world in the galaxy. The footage was impossible to ignore. An 8-year-old human child standing between ancient dragons and Galactic Council warships. Owen's face appeared on billions of screens, his small voice speaking impossible languages, his innocent questions cutting through centuries of political maneuvering. On Earth, the reaction was volcanic. Humans had been part of the Galactic Council for barely 200 years, still considered the newcomers, the naive upstarts who didn't understand how things worked. But seeing one of their children threatened, seeing a little boy who had done nothing wrong facing military intervention, touched something deep in human nature. Protests erupted in every major city. Millions took to the streets demanding Owen's protection. The human government, which had tried to stay neutral to avoid antagonizing the council, found itself facing a population ready to riot. Captain Yuki Tanaka made the decision without consulting anyone. She commanded an independent freighter called the Wandering Star, and she had a crew that agreed with her completely. They diverted from their trading route and set course for Draenus, broadcasting their intention across all channels. "This is Captain Tanaka to all vessels. We're going to Draenus. We're going to stand with that kid. Anyone who wants to join us, you're welcome. Anyone who wants to stop us, you'll have to go through us first." Within a day, she wasn't alone. 40 human ships changed course to join her. Then 100. Then 500. They came from everywhere: cargo haulers, passenger liners, private yachts, even a few outdated military vessels crewed by veterans who couldn't stomach watching a child in danger. The Chitresh warrior clans shocked everyone by declaring support for Owen. Their representative, Commander Scree, addressed the council with clicking mandibles that translated to razor-sharp clarity. The Directorate claims they protect stability by controlling knowledge. "This is the logic of tyrants. We Chitresh no tyranny. We fought 3 civil wars to escape it. We will not stand by while it takes a new form, hiding behind bureaucracy and fear." Species across the galaxy chose sides. Some supported the Directorate, fearing what unknown architect technology might do. Others saw the situation for what it was: powerful factions trying to suppress truth because it threatened their control. On Draenus, Owen spent hours in meditation with Cinderclaw. The ancient dragon taught him to reach deeper into the connection with the architect's gift. In dreams and visions, Owen saw more of their purpose. He saw the architects in their prime, beings of crystalline thought and radiant consciousness. They had evolved alone in their galaxy, achieving wonders of science and philosophy, But with all their knowledge, they couldn't escape one fundamental truth. They were lonely. So they seeded life, not to create servants or worshippers, but to create diversity, a million different ways of thinking, experiencing, expressing consciousness. They wanted conversation, debate, art, friendship. They wanted a galaxy full of perspectives they could never imagine on their own. The first tongue was their gift to make this possible. Not a language to control, but a bridge, a way to share understanding while preserving unique identity. Eventually, they hoped all species would naturally develop this ability, creating a galactic communion of minds. But the architects made one mistake. They didn't account for fear, for those who would see connection as a threat rather than a gift. Owen woke from his vision with tears on his face. Dr. Silva, who had been monitoring him, leaned forward with concern. "What did you see?" "They loved us," Owen whispered. "All of us, every species, they loved what we could become, and people killed that dream because they were afraid of love." Rachel held her son close. "It's not too late. You're showing the galaxy what the architects wanted, what we could still be." The Preservation Directorate's fleet arrived in force. 200 warships surrounded Draenis, their weapons charged and ready. The commander, Admiral Rice, sent a final ultimatum. Surrender the child within the hour or face military intervention. The Scarix will be held accountable for harboring a dangerous anomaly. All personnel on Research Station Draenis will be detained for investigation. This is your last chance to comply peacefully. The dragons filled the sky in response, thousands strong. They had called every Scarix from across the planet. Young and old, they came to protect Owen, to protect the truth. Then Owen made his choice. Before anyone could stop him, he walked out onto the landing platform outside the station. No armor, no weapons, just a small boy in simple clothes, standing in the open where the Directorate's ships could see him clearly. "Owen, no," David shouted, but Rachel held him back. "Look," she breathed, "just look." Owen raised his face to the ships above and spoke, not in English, not in Scarix, in the first tongue itself, the pure, unfiltered language of the architects. His voice shouldn't have carried across the vacuum of space, but somehow it did, transmitted on frequencies that touched every communication system simultaneously. Across the Directorate fleet, something impossible happened. Soldiers from a dozen different species who spoke different languages and came from incompatible cultures heard Owen's words and understood them. Not just the meaning, but the emotion behind them. The hope, the sorrow, the plea for understanding. "You think you're protecting the galaxy by controlling knowledge," Owen said, his child's voice carrying ancient wisdom. "But the architects never meant for us to be controlled. They meant for us to be free, free to understand each other, free to bridge the distances between us. I'm not dangerous. Fear is dangerous. Ignorance is dangerous. Love and understanding are what saves us." In the warship Relentless, a young officer named Chen pressed his hand to his chest, feeling Owen's words resonate in his heart. He looked at his commander, a grizzled veteran from a species known for their rigid discipline. The commander's eyes were wet with tears. He had understood too. "Sir," Chen said quietly, "we can't do this. We can't fire on a child who's only trying to help us understand each other." Across the fleet, similar conversations erupted. Not everyone was swayed. Some remained convinced the Directorate was right, but cracks appeared in their united front. Commander Scree's Chitresh vessels moved to position themselves between the Directorate ships and Draenis. Captain Tanaka's growing human armada did the same. The dragons circled overhead, ready to die protecting the small figure standing alone on the platform. Owen spoke again in the first tongue. "You don't have to fight, you don't have to be afraid. The architects left us gifts, not weapons. They left us the tools to become family instead of enemies. Please, just listen, just try to understand." Admiral Rice gave the order to fire, but in 3 ships, crews refused. In 7 more, weapons systems mysteriously malfunctioned. In a dozen others, commanders simply hesitated, unable to justify opening fire on a child whose only weapon was words. The standoff stretched into hours. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if ancient fear would triumph over new hope. Commander Scree broke formation first. Her Chitresh battle cruiser swung around to face the Directorate fleet, but her weapons remained cold. She broadcast on all frequencies, her clicking language translated for every species. I will not fire on dragons defending a child. I will not follow orders that contradict everything we claim to believe about justice and protection of the innocent. The Directorate has lost its way. I choose a different path. Her declaration rippled through the assembled forces. 3 more Chitresh ships joined her. Then a mixed-species merchant vessel. Then a Council patrol frigate whose captain had just watched her own daughter's video message begging her not to hurt Owen. The Directorate loyalists opened fire on the defectors. Space lit up with weapons fire. Ships scattered, some trying to flee, others engaging. The Scarix dove into the chaos, their breath weapons cutting through smaller vessels. Captain Tanaka's civilian ships tried to form a defensive screen, their improvised shields barely holding against military-grade weapons. Owen watched the battle unfold from the platform, horror on his young face. This was his fault. People were dying because of him, because he existed. Dr. Silva grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the station. Owen, we have to get you to safety. But Owen pulled away. He had felt something when he spoke the first tongue to the fleet. A connection like touching a vast network that spread beneath everything. The architect installation buried deep under Draenus wasn't just rock and crystal. It was still active, still waiting. I can stop this, Owen said. I can show them, really show them what the architects meant. Owen, no, Rachel ran toward her son. Whatever you're thinking, you're just a child, you can't. I can activate the installation, Owen interrupted, like I did with the crystal on Praxis, but bigger, strong enough that everyone here feels it, feels what it means to truly understand each other. Dr. Silva's face went pale. Owen, the energy required for that would burn through you like a supernova. Your brain couldn't handle it. You would die. Maybe, Owen said quietly. Or maybe I just won't be able to do it anymore after. Either way, it's better than watching people kill each other over me. David reached the platform, breathing hard. Son, we didn't come this far to lose you. There has to be another way. There isn't, Dad. Owen looked up at his father with eyes too old for his face. The architects put their installation here for a reason. Draenus was meant to be the awakening point, the place where the galaxy remembered what it could be. I'm just the spark, but the fire has to spread from here. Above them, a Directorate missile struck a human cargo ship. The vessel broke apart, escape pods scattering like seeds. Some would make it, many wouldn't. Owen made his decision. He ran. Ashenwing saw him go and understood immediately. She swooped down, scooped him onto her back, and flew toward the mountains where the installation lay buried. Directorate ships tried to intercept, but Cinderclaw and a dozen other dragons formed a flying wedge, blocking their path with walls of flame. Rachel and David could only watch as their son disappeared into the distance, carried by a dragon towards something that might kill him. The installation entrance was a cave that descended deep into Draenus's crust. Ashenwing could only go so far before her size made passage impossible. She set Owen down gently. Little Kethriel, she said softly, you do not have to do this. Yes, I do. Owen touched her scaled snout one last time. Thank you for teaching me, for protecting me, for believing I was worth protecting. You are worth more than you know, Ashenwing replied. The architects would be proud. Owen descended alone. The path was lit by crystals embedded in the walls, their glow responding to his presence. He could feel the installation calling to him, recognizing something in his consciousness that marked him as compatible. At the heart of the mountain, he found the chamber. Massive crystals arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They hummed with contained energy, with knowledge and power waiting for the right moment. To wake, Owen placed his hands on the central crystal. The connection was instant and overwhelming. His consciousness expanded beyond his small body, reaching out through quantum pathways the architects had woven into the fabric of space itself. He felt millions of minds within range, human and Chitresh, Scarix and species he didn't have names for, each one unique, each one beautiful in its complexity. And he showed them what he had learned, not through words but through direct experience, what it felt like to hear the first tongue, to understand not just language but intention, emotion, the core of what someone meant when they reached out to communicate. Across Draenus space, weapons fire ceased. Soldiers on both sides of the conflict suddenly felt something they had never experienced before. A Chitresh warrior understood the fear driving the directorate officer trying to kill her, understood it as deeply as her own emotions. A human captain felt the ancient honor code that motivated Skree's defection. A Scarix perceived the desperate loneliness that made the architects seed consciousness across the galaxy. They didn't become telepaths. They didn't lose their individuality or their cultures. They simply gained the capacity to bridge the gap between self and other, to truly see through different eyes while remaining themselves. The battle stopped. Ships drifted, crews too overwhelmed by sudden understanding to continue fighting. Enemies looked at each other and saw not threats but people. Different people with different needs and fears, but people nonetheless, worthy of consideration, worthy of trying to understand. In the crystal chamber, Owen collapsed. Blood trickled from his nose, his ears. His brain had processed more information in 5 minutes than most beings encountered in a lifetime. The connections that allowed him to naturally speak the first tongue burned bright and then burned out, pathways closing as his consciousness retreated back into the fragile shell of his 8-year-old body. Rachel and David found him there an hour later, guided by Ashenwing. He was breathing but unconscious, his vital signs weak but stable. Rachel gathered him in her arms, sobbing with relief and grief. "I can still hear them," Owen whispered, barely audible. His eyes remained closed. "The architects, they're not gone, they're just waiting for us to be ready for the next step." Then he slipped into deep unconsciousness. Dr. Silva's medical scans showed the damage. The neural pathways that had given Owen his gift were gone, burned away by the massive energy transfer. He would live, but he would never speak the first tongue again. Above them, the Directorate fleet was in chaos. Half the ships had mutinied. The other half were too shaken to fight. Commander Skree took control of the situation, declaring a ceasefire and demanding the Galactic Council investigate the Preservation Directorate immediately. The awakening had begun, and though it cost Owen his extraordinary gift, it gave the galaxy something far more valuable. Hope that they could become what the architects had dreamed, different voices singing one song. 10 years had changed everything and nothing. Owen Reed stood in the diplomatic staging area of the Galactic Council chambers, adjusting his formal Earth ambassador robes. At 18, he was the youngest person ever appointed to the position, but no one had questioned his qualifications. How could they? He was the reason they were all here in this new council trying to build something better. Through the viewing window, he could see the assembly hall where representatives from 300 species waited. The old Galactic Council had dissolved in scandal after the Battle of Draenus, as historians now called it. The Preservation Directorate's crimes had been exposed completely. Their suppression of architect sites, their assassination of scholars who got too close to the truth, their manipulation of galactic policy for 30,000 years. Some of the Directorate's leaders faced trial. Others had fled to the far reaches of space. But their power was broken, and in its place, something new was growing. Owen caught his reflection in the polished wall. He looked normal now. No special abilities, no supernatural connection to ancient languages, just a young man who had lost something precious and gained perspective in return. Nervous, Captain Tanaka appeared beside him. She served as Earth's military liaison now, her moment of defiance at Draenus having turned her into a legend. "Terrified," Owen admitted. "I'm about to address the council and I can't even speak the first tongue anymore. I'm just me." "Just you saved the galaxy," Tanaka said with a slight smile. "I think that counts for something." Dr. Silva emerged from a side corridor, data pad in hand. She led the architect. Research initiative now, coordinating study of the dozens of installations discovered across the galaxy. Each one held knowledge. Medical advances that had cured diseases thought incurable, engineering principles that revolutionized space travel, philosophical frameworks that helped species understand their own consciousness better. "The latest reports from the Praxis dig," she said, handing Owen the pad. "They found something you should see." Owen scanned the information and his breath caught. Deep beneath the crystal chambers where his mother had worked 18 years ago, researchers had found a message. Written in the first tongue, translated by scholars trained in its principles. The message was simple. "When you are ready, we will return, not to rule but to join. Family calls to family across all distances." "They're still out there," Owen whispered. "The architects somewhere." "Seems like it," Silver agreed. "The question is, will we be ready when they come back?" Rachel and David appeared then, both older but still strong. They had retired from active research to focus on teaching, training the next generation of xenobiologists in the principles of understanding before studying. They looked at their son with pride. "Time to go," David said gently. "The council is waiting." Owen walked into the assembly hall and the noise dimmed. 300 species, countless billions of beings watching via broadcast, all focused on this young human. He approached the central podium, designed to accommodate speakers of any size or shape. He didn't need notes. The words came from his heart. 10 years ago, I was 8 years old and scared. I had an ability I didn't understand, and powerful people wanted to control me because of it. The Scarix dragons protected me. Commander Scree and the Chitresh defended me. Captain Tanaka and countless humans stood up for me. People from dozens of species risked everything to protect one child they had never met. He paused, making eye contact with various representatives. "You want to know what the first tongue taught me? It wasn't about power or control. It was about recognizing that every being, no matter how different, experiences fear and hope, loneliness and love. The architects didn't create us to worship them or serve them. They created the conditions for consciousness because they were lonely. They wanted friends. They wanted to share the universe with. Beings who could see it through different eyes." Ashenwing, attending as the Scarix representative, nodded her great head. She was ancient now, nearing the end of her long life, but she had insisted on being here for this moment. "I don't have my gift anymore," Owen continued. "I can't speak the first tongue. I can't directly share thoughts and feelings, but I learned something more important. We don't need supernatural abilities to understand each other. We just need to try, to listen, to care enough to bridge the distances between us." He gestured to the assembled council. "Look at us. Species that once barely communicated now work together on research projects. The Chitresh and Scarix, who fought territorial wars for centuries, now have cultural exchange programs. Human diplomats train in first tongue principles and broker peace deals. We're not perfect. We still have conflicts, but we approach them differently now, with empathy, with the recognition that we're all trying to survive and thrive in this vast universe." Commander Scree clicked her mandibles in agreement. She led the reformed council's security forces now, teaching soldiers to be protectors rather than weapons. "The architects left us gifts," Owen said. "Knowledge and tools to build a better galaxy. But the greatest gift they gave us was the reminder that we're stronger together than apart. Not because we're the same, but because we're different. Every species brings unique perspectives. When we share them, when we truly listen to each other, we see more than any one of us could alone." He looked up at the viewing screens, showing billions of watchers across the galaxy. "My gift wasn't that I could speak to dragons. My gift was showing us that we were already speaking the same language, the language of hope, curiosity, and care for each other. We just needed to remember how to listen." The assembly hall erupted in sounds of approval. Chitresh clicking, Scarix rumbling, humans applauding, and dozens of other expressions of agreement from species across the spectrum of life. Owen stepped back from the podium. His speech was done. His role as the impossible child who changed everything had evolved into something simpler and more profound. He was a bridge, a reminder, a symbol of what cooperation and understanding could achieve. Later, standing on the observation deck with his parents, watching ships from hundreds of worlds coming and going in peaceful commerce, Owen felt a familiar presence. Ashenwing had joined them, her massive form visible through the reinforced viewing port. "You did well, little Kethriel," she said in Scarix. Owen couldn't understand the exact words anymore, but the translator caught them. "I just told the truth," Owen replied. "That is all the architects ever asked of any of us." Ashenwing's ancient eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "To seek truth, to share it, and to build bridges with it. You have honored their memory, young one, and perhaps when they return they will find us worthy of their friendship." Owen smiled, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the architects watched and waited. And for the first time in millions of years, the galaxy was becoming ready to meet them not as worshippers or servants, but as equals, as family. The boy who could speak with dragons had given the galaxy a gift more precious than any language. The reminder that understanding begins with trying, and family is found not in similarity, but in the choice to bridge differences with love.